Hello, my name is Trent Marks, and today we will be talking about how language and religion affect a person's identity. So, to start us off, we will be talking about language and identity from a religious point of view. For centuries, language has played a role in the identity many people find for themselves. Actions such as prayer and worship use language to communicate with God or the divine or whatever higher power people believe in. For example, Judaism uses Hebrew as their language. For Islam, they have Arabic, and for Hinduism, they have Sanskrit, and so on and so forth. Religious identity can both be formed or changed by language. It acts as a barrier and a gateway to finding one's identity. Alright, so identity through language. There was a reporter, Matthew Jenkins, who writes for The Guardian, a newspaper, who actually interviewed 3 scholars studying the ancient language of their religion. And one of these interviewees was Ann Evans, who was a Lithuanian Holocaust survivor who was studying Hebrew at the Spiro Ark, which is a Jewish education school. In the interview, one of the things that was very interesting was that Anne stated that the language of one's religion is intimately involved in an understanding of that religion, with word stems allowing a whole philosophy to be found in a single term. The other 2 interviewees had very similar views on their languages, and these were 3 different religions who were all saying very similar things about how the language that they speak connects to their religion. Does change in language affect identity? And specifically in this case, the identity you find in your religion. One of the religions I focused in on for this was Catholicism, because back when it was first at its power, it conducted all of its masses in traditional Latin, which even back then was a dead language, which means that no one spoke it normally. It was not common to hear it anywhere other than places like in a Catholic Mass. So very few people actually understood what was being said or read from the text. Recently, well, not too recently, but recently they switched to conducting masses in many different languages so that everyone who attended Mass understood what was being said. This led to a controversy, kind of like the more traditional Catholics who were used to doing Mass in Latin to the modern Catholics who wanted to understand what was being said to them. Because religions are generally ancient, the languages they use are often partially or wholly unknown to the general public, and sometimes even the religious leaders themselves. Attempts to bring the language up to date often coincide with a loss of religious faith, and it's difficult to say which is the cause and which is the effect. Many Roman Catholics are still regretting the abandonment of Latin Mass in favor of the vernacular, and misuse of the Book of Common Prayer by the Church of England has not prompted an influx of new believers into the masses. Next up is syntax and diction. The reason I titled this page, or this slide, as this is because oftentimes identity and religion isn't found by what you believe in, it is founded in what you believe in, but it is affirmed by the teachings that you hear. In the Christian church, especially, a church that I'm very familiar with, there are many verses in the Holy Bible that give the reader a sense of belonging. For example, there's Ephesians 1:5, which says, He predestined us for adoption to sonship through Jesus Christ in accordance with His pleasure and will. And John 1:12 states, Yet to all who did receive Him, to those who believed in His name, He gave the right to become children of God. And for those who are Christians who believe in these verses, basically what that's saying is that we are all children of God, and that is the identity that we gain from believing in this. Another way in which identity can be formed through language in religion is as a response to resistance put towards someone. One such story is a story that Sarfraz Manzoor tells about the 9/11 attacks, and how after they happened, there were slurs such as Bin Laden and Al-Qaeda being thrown around at all the wrong people simply based on their appearance. But even though the slurs were being directed based on appearance, they were coming from a religious view that was using the physical appearance to stereotype religion. This caused some people, such as Sikhs and Hindus, to more prominently establish their religion so as to separate themselves from the groups of radicals who caused the 9/11 attacks. And one way that they would do this would be to establish the difference in languages. Another example is a story that Yasmin Hai tells about her friend Nazia, who chose to return to Islam as a way of striking back at the society that had rejected her. Many of the reborn Muslims begin to emphasize many of their traditional characteristics and values, and their native language was amongst these. Nazia was a Pakistani who lived in Great Britain, and many of the Pakistanis that adopted a Western culture in Great Britain could not speak their native tongue and were incapable of communicating and having intimate talks with their own parents, simply because they did not speak their native language. And this resulted in families suffering internally with intimacy issues amongst the ranks, and with many young people not knowing their place in society. However, many of the young Pakistanis and other ethnicities that practiced Islam, such as Nazia, saw that becoming a practicing Muslim again was a way of being born again, of wiping the slate clean. So, in conclusion, when it comes to answering whether language affects religious identity positively or negatively, there is no right or wrong answer unless the answer is both. However, one thing is for sure, language has a direct connection to affecting one's religious identity. Whether it be the language we speak, giving us intimacy with our religion, or adopting a new language that draws you away from your religion and your identity, it is easy to see the connection between the two. The more it is understood that language has an effect on religion, the better society will be at recognizing and adapting so as to avoid the corruption and alteration of any more religious identities. Thank you all so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this little walk down our path of religious identity and language. If you have any more questions, feel free to look them up online or send me an email.